Hi guys, welcome back. JT here for delicatebeats.com. Today I want to talk about reverbs and how I use them when mixing my songs. Let's go. Before diving into the mixing of the song, I just want to touch upon a few concepts such as depth, space, and dimension. When you're mixing a track, you want to represent each of the layers and tracks as an instrument on a soundstage. And obviously, none of these instruments are going to be at the exact same spot. So here in this example, you have a jazz band where the piano player is the star. So he's going to be in the middle and in the front. The drums are always in the center, but they're usually at the back of the stage because they're louder. Then you have your two main melodic featured instruments, the guitar and in this case the vibes or the xylophone. And finally the Rhodes piano and the bass are somewhat closer to the center because they're deeper in frequencies, lower in frequencies actually, and they are in the back of the stage also because those bass frequencies again take up a lot of space. So if we think in terms of reverb, the further on the stage these instruments are, the longer the decay of the reverb is going to be and the larger the room or hall are going to be. So now let's jump to our EDM session. Here is the beat that we are going to work with today. So the beat is very full, there's a lot going on. We should see this as the last chorus where everything comes in, everybody's jumping up and down in the club, and we want to make this very exciting. But because there's a lot of instruments, we're going to have to work with reverb to separate in space each of those elements. So I've color-coded each of the tracks, and let's see this as the C, where the deeper you go, the bigger the reverb and the further the instrument is going to be from the listener. I'm going to isolate the bass now, and we're going to pick a reverb for this one. So the tone is very, very low in frequency. There's not much going in the mids and higher frequencies. With bass, you always have to be very careful with reverb. Let me pull up the Space Designer here. So it has to be very subtle. Because the bass is very important in this beat, I'm going to keep it close to the listener, tuck it in with the drums. So I'm going to use a small room. Let's pick any one at random here. And what we are going to make sure first is that we are going to cut everything below. Let's start with roughly 200 Hertz. And I'm going to put the reverb send very, very low so that we're just adding a touch of reverb on the bass. This one here is muddying up the sound a bit. So what I'm going to do is switch between the impulse responses here with the arrows. And we're going to leave the EQ and the reverb as it is for now and just find something that complements our bass tone. So by switching the reverb on and off, you can see that it's moving just a tad bit further in the spectrum. And it's also cleaning up, a bit of the mud. So I think this one is interesting here, Drum Booth 3. And what I'm going to do now is duplicate this exact same reverb with the drums by pressing Command Alt and dragging and dropping the plugin here. And just for a second here, I'm going to isolate the drums and let's see what that sounds like. So I think it sounds a bit boxy and fake. So what I'm going to do again is just trying to find a bigger reverb. Now let's try to bring the bass back in. Yeah, I think I like this one because you're really just feeling, a little trail on the claps and hi-hats. And while the bass is thickened up actually by the reverb. Let's not forget we're working on the chorus here, so we need to make this sound very big. Next up, I'm going to solo the guitars. And remember, as we're going deeper, the reverb needs to be bigger. So in this case, I'm going to try a random medium room, and let's try this piano warmth. My guitar tone is quite, edgy and thin, so I'm going to try to give it a little bit of body also with the reverb. I'll usually start by soloing the instrument, just so that when it's soloed it doesn't sound unnatural or too wet. Obviously, when you're adding reverb, you're actually making the sound louder most of the times because sorry about that, because I'll usually leave the dry signal at maximum volume, and then whatever you're adding here is on top of the dry signal. So usually you'll have to play with the volume fader a bit, just to make sure that your balance is kept. All right, on to the trickier track of this arrangement, these huge and very aggressive chords. So as the deeper we go, I'll start off here with quite a large hall. So if you go here again, large spaces, halls, and let's try this vocal hall here, for example. With this sound, I'm not going to cut any frequencies yet. I'm just going to listen to what the reverb does, and I'm not going to lower this. Also, I'm just going to keep the reverb send at a medium value. I always like to hear more of my dry signal, even though the tail is huge on this reverb. because it's easier to give the proper space to an instrument when you're actually hearing the dry signal. By the way, you can activate on and off the different curves of the EQ on the reverb. So what I'm doing right now is removing some of the higher frequencies, because the sound being already harsh, if the reverb emphasizes that, it becomes very ear tiring, and we don't want that, obviously. Right. Should we listen to the dry beat just to compare? I think so. Let's see what we started with and what we are ending up with right now. So very dry. It's missing a bit of hype. Sorry about that. The sidechain on some of these MIDI instruments sometimes starts at the wrong beat. So this is sounding pretty good. We are going to finish this up with the lead. So there are two layers to my lead melody. First, there's this quirky synth. So this one already had delay and reverb, my bad. But because I have two layers, what I'm gonna do is use this back layer to put a very, very big reverb on it. So I'm going to go for Arena on my Nexus, pull the mix knob very high, and let's listen to what that sounds like. So the pre-delay should not be stealing our reverb away. So I'm really not liking this reverb at all. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to replace it with the space designer. And again, let's go to our large spaces, and why not try, an outdoor space? Let's try Forest Echo. Again, it's very harsh in the frequencies of the vocal. So what I'm going to do is make a big dip here. I think we can even exaggerate that and make it bigger. That is much more like it. Let's reposition the volume fader here to make sure that our balance is kept. And really on this type of sound, you just want to feel the higher little trails of the reverb. You don't really need to hear the instrument as much as the other guys. And finally, let's finish up the beat with our main lead. I'm feeling like this guy should be a bit more distorted, just to keep that edge on the beat. So I'm going to use this bit crusher here and just play around with the downsampling. It doesn't make the sounds as harsh as if you put down the resolutions to say 4-bit. So let's just play around with this and get the most musical result we can. Let's find a good reverb. Let's play around with the hall reverb on this guy. And there you have it. So let's do a little before and after without the reverb. See if we improved the dimension of the beat a bit. Alright, so I'm liking what I hear. Another thing we could do is automate this reverb so that in the verse parts they would be lower or they would be off to keep our beat very dry and tight. And when we get into the pre-chorus and then the chorus, we would automate the amount of reverb we put on certain strategic tracks, such as the lead, for example. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. Let's keep the discussion going in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I'm going to put a lot of content this year. I really plan on keeping you guys busy and myself at the same time. So thank you for watching and go out and make bangers.